All right, welcome to Anthropology of Food Part 2. We're just going to touch on a few more subjects. It's substantially shorter than Anthropology of Food or What You Eat and How You Get It, Part 1. So, not only does your culture determine what you find palatable, but it also helps you determine what you think of as being good or healthy to eat. I think that may surprise some of you because we like to think that our government is running scientific tests and having people eat different diets, which they kind of do. But what your culture considers healthy is also really variable from one culture to the next. So in the Western world, we kind of think of certain things as healthy and other things as not, right? Things that are low in sugar, high in fiber, vegetables, fruits. Dairy is considered healthy in the United States, which is somewhat surprising to people in other cultures. But let's take a quick and brief look at a couple food health guides from various cultures around the planet. So here's the food guide pyramid in air quotes. For a while, I think in the US it was the plate as well. When I was growing up, it was a food guide pyramid. Basically, in the United Kingdom, you can see fruits and vegetables are really emphasized. Bread and rice should be a third of your diet. We had a kind of trend here for a while that was very low carb. And the remaining third of your diet should be made up of meat, fish, eggs, and beans. Food and drinks high in sugar get to be the smallest part of your plate, and milk and dairy foods being somewhat smaller. This is largely similar to what we think of in the US, and that's not surprising. In China, it is the food pagoda, I think. And this is a little different because at the base of this pagoda are grains. The second layer being fruits and vegetables, the third layer from the bottom being meats, the second layer being dairy. We tend to put dairy quite a bit further down. And at the top are fatty oils, beers, potato chips, and things like that. Water down there at the bottom, reminding you to drink plenty of water and get exercise there on the left. The Mediterranean may be kind of hard for you to see. But you see that non refined cereals and products. So they are telling you not to eat refined wheats, whereas the United States, we're kind of like, any grains are good because we make a lot of refined and processed grains. Fruit and vegetables are the next tier. Dairy products are in the daily zone. Physical activity is in the daily. Wine, in moderation, is in the daily zone, whereas we think of alcohol as being not healthy. In the Mediterranean, they think of alcohol as being a thing you drink, especially wine. Weekly fish, poultry, olives, potatoes, eggs, and sweets. And red meat is monthly. That is very different from the US, where we raise cattle and we have fancy dinners with steaks, and red meat is healthy for you because we make it. So they're cautioning that you should only have 4 servings of red meat per month, whereas we're like, yeah, meat's a good, healthy protein for you to have because we have cattle, and they don't as much. So these are pretty different, not entirely different. Everybody agrees that fruits and vegetables are good and you should get a baseline level of grains, but largely this is determined by what kind of resources, food resources you have in your region. And so they're going to push certain food resources on people based on what's available, even going as so far as to say these are healthy because we have them. Um, the biggest misnomer, in my opinion, in the US is we really push dairy products, especially in dairy regions like Wisconsin, on people that shouldn't be eating dairy products. That the majority of people who are not considered racially white are lactose intolerant, and it is not healthy for them to eat dairy products. So we tend to really push dairy on people who should, frankly, not be eating dairy because we make a lot of dairy here in the United States. So there's a combination of factors that help determine what you eat. So it's partially your culture, it's partially the environment or resources that are available, and partially biological preference. And so all these three things come together to kind of determine your diet collectively. Food has had a large effect has been affected by globalization, has had a large effect on globalization. And no food stuff has changed a culture more than coffee has changed the culture of the United States. So coffee can only be grown in certain areas where it's warm enough to grow coffee, and it was crucial. Coffee became really important to our work culture in the United States, even though we can't grow it anywhere in the United States, with the exception of Hawaii. Um, it became such a staple item for our consumption, so much so that, in fact, when the unions were initially negotiating a 15-minute break during the day, one of the reasoning part of the reasoning was, well, if they get a 15-minute break, they'll drink coffee, they'll get caffeinated, and work 8 times harder after the break. So the 15-minute break that is required by U.S. labor law is in part caused by coffee, right? This thing that we can't grow here in the United States. It's expected to be provided by most employers in the United States, especially if you work a white collar job. And of course, we can either buy it fair trade, meaning that we're paying reasonable prices for it, or not, depending on how you buy it and whether you pick responsibly grown coffees or not. So it's really interesting to me that this food item has shaped our culture here in the United States so much, but we can't grow it here. That we have to import it, that we have to buy it from other places and ship it all the way to us. And yet it's such a staple of our culture that we refer to our labor law enforced breaks as coffee breaks. And the part of the negotiation to even get those breaks was formed by coffee. So it's interesting that foods in our new global economy can become a staple in a place where they literally can't be produced. Quinoa is another interesting case study. It was originally thought of as a superfood by NASA, and it is, in fact, very healthy for you. And there's been a trend here in the United States to import as much quinoa as possible now that we know that it's this really healthy thing to eat. The funny thing about it is it can only really be grown in a couple different regions on the western side of South America here. And so the craze for quinoa in the United States has caused tons of importation, and it's literally taking food off people's plates as the people who grow it now can't afford to do anything but sell it to get the money associated with it. So in some cases, we're literally taking food off people's plates who otherwise would have been growing and eating it themselves are now kind of being forced to import or to export it because of the large amount of money that they can receive for doing so. So food crazes in industrialized nations can cause huge shifts in diets in other places. Again, because of our increasingly global and swiftly moving economy. So, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty for drinking coffee. I certainly drink a ton of coffee or eating quinoa, but it's just interesting to track and think about how food crazes in some places can change the diets of people in other places or change their economic well being. So while we seek these healthy or good foods that are often exotic and can't be grown in the climates in which we live, keep in the back of your mind that we're shaping cultures elsewhere, at least in the places where these things can be grown. And it's only in recent years that we can move food at a rate such that we can move it before it rots or something like that. And that's really a product of our new transportation technologies. Anyway, that's all I got for this very short lecture. I don't want to guilt you not into not eating quinoa or coffee. I certainly consume both those things. Just something to think about how our tastes in food or trends in food can affect global cultures and global economies.